nice. My hair's just a pain in the rear right now. All right. I will grab this real quick. Oh, by the way, check out my shirt. I don't have to knock this around too much. One of the best parts about this shirt, aside from it's freaking awesome, it glows in the dark. I don't know if it'll do it now because I need to have like a lot of light. Let me turn the lightsies off. I don't know if you can see it very well, but if you get enough light on it, it'll do it. Pretty sweet. Give me 1 second to grab the stuff. Alrighty. So we got Silmarillion Special Illustration Edition. We've got ourselves Le Hobbit Special Edition. And then we have the Big Kahuna, the 3-in-1. You might say the Trinity of the Bookie. The Lord of the Rings. With special stuff. Now, the question... Shall we start with the Silmarillion, move to the Hobbit, and then to Fellowship of the Ring? What say you? Raspberry coffee is a very weird flavor. I assume yeah means start with Silmarillion and then move on. Well, I just figured Silmarillion's older, and then there's the Hobbit, and then there's the Lord of the Rings. So that just seemed to be the easiest. Ugh. Otherwise, it's what? The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and then Silmarillion. We'll start with Silmarillion and get it out of the way. It's so freaking pretty. Blue. I love this blue. Freaking YouTube is retarded, so I can't just be like showing blades. Because that might be somebody being threatened by my screen or something stupid like that. Woo! Sorry, I'm getting chills touching this thing. Mm-hmm. What's over here? Oh. Check this out. There's an actual, like, cardboard cutout for that. Freaking leather. Bye-bye. Alright. Let's slide this puppy out. I got these for cheaper. Oh, dude. So it's got, like, this, like, leather bit on the binding. And then it's got this, like a mesh. Like, I mean, it's an ASMR I'd be okay with. Oh, check this out. It's even got shiny paper ends. Oh. check it out. It has J.R. Tolkien at the base. It's nice little embroidery at the top or in the middle. And obviously the Tolkien symbol in the back. Oh, yeah. Okay. First image. Halls of, I believe, Monway. Taniquetil. The halls of Monway, Taniquetil. That's number one. What is this? Ho. Ho, 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 ho. That's what this is. I see, I see, I see. Or do I? Nice. All right. We got ourselves a bloody map. I'll see if I can move this a little closer. It is. Yeah, this has got all like the markings of him like doing it and then erasing it and then doing it again. Like if you look very carefully, you can see how he put something there and then he'll like mark it off. He'll like scratch it and everything. Oh, it's so freaking good. That was in the front of the book. They got the silver on them and everything. Holy cow, look at all the books. All the books by Tolkien. That's a lot of freaking books. Illustrated by the author. List of illustrations. Genealogies, all that good stuff. The forward. Tolkien. Preface to the second edition. From a letter by J.R. Tolkien to Milton Waldman. That's a lot of letter. A lot of letter. Notes on the illustrations. Oh, this would be cool. Tolkien said of his Silmarillion mythology, which occupied him for most of his life, and it grew out of a desire to support languages he had created, which he decided could not exist in a void, and to provide for his beloved England a body of heroic stories bound up with its tongue and soil. It was a majestic and ultimately highly complex effort, which began with poems he composed as a young man. Hopefully, I can come through. The earliest of these, from September 1914, was The Voyage of Eärendil, the Evening Star. Inspired by a line from Old English, Christ, Eala Eärendil Engla behortest. Ofor Midgengerd Monum sended. Hail Eärendil, brightest of angels, above the middle earth sent unto men. It was not at first connected to a larger literary scheme, but in time Eärendil, in the Silmarillion Eärendil, It became a mariner who sails west from Middle-earth to seek the help of the Valar, greatest of the angelic powers, against Morgoth, Lord of Darkness, and with a Silmaril, one of the great jewels made by the elven artisan Feanor, is set to sail in the sky as a star, son of hope to the oppressed. In addition to its roots in storytelling and language, the Silmarillion was created also through painting and drawing. Tolkien was a keen amateur artist, skilled with pencil, pen, and brush. Some of his pictures are preserved in a sketchbook called The Book of Ishness. I think that's this book here. Possibly. I don't know. Brief account of the book and its making is what it says. Because it contains depictions of ideas symbolic or abstract, such as grown-upishness or under-tenishness. He drew places he visited and lived, but also captured remarkable visions associated with his mythology. Indeed, from the time he composed his Erendil poem, nearly all of his illustrative art was inspired by his own writings. And this is going to go on a long time. Like a long time. So maybe not cover all this. This is a note on the illustrations. This is like 10 pages. Oh, the paper's so freaking smooth. Oh, here's an illustration. The Hills of the Morning. Yeah, definitely better than ooh, the Tale of the Years manuscript title page. Where was the list? The first page is the device. Ah, so I forgot to show these. That's the Silmarils. The 3 Silmarils. Facing 8. Alright. Ilu the world from Newman west to Roman east. This is the Ilu. Ilu, whatever. Page 21. The Luthien device. Number 2, apparently. And then page 23 is the Floral Design 1. Page 24, the next page. The world about VY 500 after the fall of the lamps, Helkar, Iluin, and Ringel, Ormal, and the first fortification of the north by Melkor. And then page. Trekkie. Sideways one. $31. These are 2 flowers. These are all the illustrations that he himself did, just to clarify that. 36. This is the Finway device. Yeah. It's difficult to do this without this sliding out. Let's see, 45. This is the Melian. And 47, which is the next page in. These are very short chapters. This one is the Elway. This is the Shores of Fairy. Ooh, Feanor. So this is Feanor. Artwork extraordinaire. It's not actually Feanor, sadly, but it's the device. 57. Again, we have the Silmarils. Now we have Finway device. All right, now we have the halls of Manwë, Taniquetil, which is this image, but in the book. Benarfin device. Of course, it's the Flight of the Noldor chapter. It's the Benarfin device. The Luthien 1 device. Here's the Luthien 1 device. This is the Untitled Winged Sun, in parentheses, device. I'm assuming that's the Maiar, or the Ainur, I guess. That is the sun that becomes the sun that Sauron and even Melkor was terrified of because super overpowered. They got a lot of these. Maybe I should just skip the devices because they're just little diamonds and they don't really have anything to them, but they have actual ones. Let's see, 98. This is, how do you say that? Mithrim? And the bookmark. That's a pretty landscape. Let's see. Next one is Nargothrond. 104. There's Nargothrond. Sorry. Two little dwarf entrances. An untitled Nargothrond. 120. Ooh, this looks cool. Oops. That's not supposed to fall out just willy-nilly. It's the untitled Nargothrond. And they have the untitled Freeze of Trees. 124. I don't know what you have and haven't seen. I don't know what has or hasn't been revealed by these as special ones. Needless to say, there's 59 illustrations. Have you seen the Barad-dûr and the Mordor ones? The Númenórean carpets. Map of Númenor, Water, Wind, and Sand. Gondolin and the Vale of Tumulidin from Cristorn. Tor Nafwin, which is Fanghorn Forest. Glorund sets forth to seek... Glorund? That was Glaurund. Yeah, Glaurund sets forth to seek Turin. The Tale of Turin written in Rumilian. Nargothrond number 2. Tol Sirion, the Vale of Sirion. Let's see. Mordor's 280. Oh, that's a freaking cool drawing. And then Barad-dûr. It's just 10 pages away, it looks like. Ironically, it's not very much of the Tower of Barad-dûr. It's just like the base. A very big tower. You hear the music. I was like, what? And then we had these. Oopsies. I'm assuming this is another map of sorts. Oh, yes, this is another map. Doriath and everything. It's a little easier to see. Bellerend. Pretty snazzy wazzy wazzy. Put this back into the front. And we'll check out this cool little bit. This booklet, which I don't think you've seen before. And this I could probably read. Ooh, yeah, it's a pretty short read. The Silmarillion by J.R. Tolkien, a brief account of the book and its making by Christopher Tolkien. The majority, perhaps, of those who are familiar with his name, J.R. Tolkien, means hobbits. But many would say rather Middle-earth, and by this they refer to the great imagined country peopled by elves, by dwarves, by ents, by men of different cultures, and by orcs, through which the Fellowship of the Ring passed on its quest, peopled also, indeed, by hobbits, in one small region called the Shire. It is a rich landscape of mountain ranges, plains, forests, rivers, but richest of all in its past, its ancient roads and ruined cities, old battlefields, and vast works of stone named in many different languages. Yet there are frequent suggestions in the Lord of the Rings of an even deeper past, of lands and cities that cannot be found on the map that accompanies the book. A past nonetheless that some of the persons in the story speak of as having known and seen with their own eyes. Thus Elrond, whose memory reaches back as far as to astound Frodo the Hobbit, speaks to him of the glory of the elder days and the hosts of Beleriand. And Treebeard the old Ent sings of ancient forests where he once walked, but now all those lands lie under the wave. They speak of the lands, cities, and stories of the Silmarillion, for the Silmarillion is the history of the Eldar days, the first age of the world, as the Lord of the Rings is the history of the ending of the third, and the greater part of it takes place in that region. Here's a map of Beleriand, the lands of the north, with the detail of northwest part of the map of the west of Middle-earth in the end of the Third Age, which is basically the map I just had in there, to be fair. Whoop! Try not to lose it, but also hold it in place where you can see it. And here's Mithram, the image again. Of Middle-earth that was called Beleriand. Beleriand lay beyond the Blue Mountains, which appear in the extreme northwest of the map to the north Lord of the Rings, but it was drowned by the sea in the cataclysmic battle in which the First Age came to an end. The two books are, however, very different, and not the least of the differences is the absence from the Silmarillion of the hobbits and their cheerful, pipe-smoking provinciality, to whom the realities and the history of the great world into which they are caught up come as perpetual surprise and enlargement of their horizon. Even men do not appear in Middle-earth until the narrative is far advanced, for this is the story above all of the elves, and it is seen largely through elvish eyes, their tradition of their origins, and their account of the peculiar and separate fate. The Silmarillion is indeed central stock of that great imaginative enterprise from which Lord of the Rings was derived, for the elves were there from its beginning, and in them are to be discerned some of the primary aesthetic and philosophical convictions of its author. Again, whereas the entire action of the story of The Lord of the Rings takes place within a span of 20 years and possesses great narrative urgency, the pressure and fear of the immediate and unknown event, the Silmarillion traverses long ages and its elegiac air, I'm not familiar with that word, and tone might be described in my father's own words about the Old English poem Beowulf, when he wrote that its marker was telling of things already old and weighted with regret, and he expended his art in making keen that touch upon the heart which sorrows have that are both poignant and remote. The Silmarillion does indeed begin at the beginning, with the elvish myth of the creation of the world, and it tells of great wars fought out at the beginning of time, when Morgoth, the power of evil incarnate in the world, sought to wrest the mastery of Middle-earth from the gods, for in the Silmarillion appears a pantheon, scarcely glimpsed in the Lord of the Rings, whose powers and natures are uniquely conceived. The story then passes to the birth of the elves in Middle-earth and their summoning of the gods to dwell with them in their paradise of Valinor in the far west beyond the sea. There follows the making of the Silmarils, the Jewels of Light, greatest of all achievements of all the elves, and the theft of them by Morgoth, the rebellion of the elves against the gods, and their departure from Valinor and return to Middle-earth to wage war against the Dark Lord. From here on, again to quote from my father's essay on Beowulf, disaster is foreboded, defeat is the theme. The Silmarillion chronicles the ruinous history of the elves in Beleriand and the failure of arms and their courage either to regain the Silmarils or to defend what they have achieved, and the destruction one by one of their great redoubts, by fire from without and treachery from within. Through the complex narrative run many interwoven strands, the workings of the curse of the god on the rebellious elves, and of the blasphemous oath taken by the maker of the Silmarils and his sons, in which they laid claim to them forever. The mysterious operations of the sea god Ulmo to devise a new hope out of ruin, and the power for good and evil of the Silmarils themselves. I have implied that the Silmarillion is an essential part of that long story that ended with the departure of the Ringbearers from the Grey Havens in the last chapter of The Lord of the Rings. That story began a very long time ago. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit, was the beginning of the hobbits, but it was certainly not the beginning of the world into which Mr. Baggins strayed. The earliest of the tale that afterward became the Silmarillion, the story of the fall of Gondolin, was written during the First World War. Long afterward he recorded that he wrote it out of my head during sick leave from the army in 1917, and he told me once that he began the Silmarillion in army huts crowded, filled with the noise of gramophones. Indeed, some of the lines of verse in which appear the 7 names of Gondolin are scribbled on the back of a paper, setting out the chain of responsibility in a battalion. The story and those that followed it during the next years are still in existence, written rapidly in battered notebooks that are often only decipherable with patience and a magnifying glass. Oh, pardon me. At the time of my father's death, 56 years later, it was still unfinished. For nearly 20 years after the publication of The Lord of the Rings in 1954 and 55, he had continued to work on the matter of Middle-earth, until it had reached a luxuriance that was beyond his declining energies to order. Thus the Silmarillion is at once the precursor of and the sequel to The Lord of the Rings. A curious situation for which he himself, when badgered for a definition of the relation between the two books, coined the highly uncharacteristic word prequel. Nevertheless, the Silmarillion, as now to be published, goes back to the earliest versions and with most of the essentials of its conception. The gods in the west beyond the sea, the secret city of Gondolin hidden behind its encircling mountains, the forest kingdom of Doriath, the stronghold of the Dark Lord in Angband, here's Gondolin in the Vale of Tumladen from Christhorn. Angband in the north. While many of the legends, the 2 trees of Valinor, whose light was imprisoned in the Silmarils, the first awakening of the elves in Middle-earth, and the stories of Beren and Luthien of Turin Turambar, survived with little really fundamental change from those early writings. As time passed, they became a permanent element in my father's mind. They were not as completed things from which an author passes on to new and separate creations, but sources of imaginative energy throughout his life, a stable body of legend, life-giving to be explored for new meaning and capable of new interpretation. When in The Lord of the Rings, Aragorn on the Hill of Weathertop attempted to ease the fear of his companions by telling the story of Beren and Luthien, he was indeed telling them an old story, and not one got up to give a factitious air of antiquity. And they could lend themselves to different treatments, to no longer and shorter versions, to ample poems in various meters, which might again be reduced to prose. Turambar. As in the case of the story of Beren and Luthien and the Silmarillion, or they could be represented as annals in the learned chronicles of people living long after. But if this mythology became authentically based in an imagined past, to which in later writings the great figures of the Third Age look back with awe, and therefore in a sense detached from himself, it was nevertheless the product of his own imagining, and in great part the imagining of his youth. Moreover, it was never published, and therefore never received a form fixed and irrevocable outside of his own manuscripts. Thus he was free, being both creator and interpreter, to develop it, to devise new detail, to suppress old motives, and to discover new ones. I say discover because that is how he himself saw it. And he said once, always I had the sense of recording what was already there, somewhere, not of inventing. In notes that he wrote as private discussions or thinking aloud, he often spoke as if the solution to a problem could be found by penetrating more deeply into the matter, as if some contradiction could best be resolved in terms of what was already known. Far more rarely did he treat his work autocratically, saying, "This won't do," or "I must get rid of that." Yet it was subjected to close critical examination, and things wouldn't do, and things were got rid of, but usually by subtle transformation rather than by outright rejection. So that the study of the growth of these legends can seem not unlike that of those of actual peoples, the product of many minds and generations. But by the time of my father's death, the amount of writing in existence on the subject of the three ages was huge in quantity, since it extended over a lifetime, disordered, more full of beginnings than of ends, and varying in the content from heroic verse and the ancient English alliterative meter to severe historical analysis. And here's Fanghorn Forest. Also referenced as Tor Na Fuen. To severe historical analysis. Oh, look, the Tale of the Years manuscript, which we already saw in the other one in the book. Of his own extremely difficult languages, as a vast repository and labyrinth of story, of poetry, and of philosophy, and of philology. By no means all of this was the Silmarillion proper. Of course, that had a definitive narrative structure, but it was as the process expansion, waves of revision passing over, it had petered out or had been overtaken by other waves, leading to a frequent lack of coherence, and many parts existed in parallel versions, often divergent at essential turns in the story. To bring into publishable form was a task at once utterly absorbing and alarming in its own responsibility towards something that is unique. To decide what form should be was not easy, and for a time I worked toward a book that would show something of this diversity, this unfinished and many-branched growth. But it became clear to me that the result would be so complex as to require much study for its comprehension, and I feared to crush the Silmarillion beneath the weight of its own history. I set myself, therefore, to work out a single text, by selection and arrangement. To give even an impression of the way that this has been done is scarcely possible in a short space, and it must suffice to say that there is a result. The Silmarillion is emphatically my father's book, and in no sense mine. Here and there I had to develop the narrative out of notes and rough drafts. I had to make many choices between competing versions, and to make many changes of detail. And in the last few chapters, which had been left mostly untouched for many years, I had in places to modify the narrative and make it coherent. But essentially what I have done has been the work of compilation, not of completion. At the end of the book are given, according to my father's express intention, two short separate works. The first of these, The Downfall of Numenor, is an Atlantis legend. Sorry, I need to get a drink. The men that were faithful in the war against Morgoth were granted as reward a great lifespan on the island of Numenor, set in the seas between Middle-earth and Valinor, the land of the gods. But they cast away their gift in the attempt to escape from death, being deceived by Sauron, at first the agent of Morgoth, and afterwards himself the supreme power of evil in the world, the Lord of the Rings. The last king of the Númenóreans sailed with a great armada against Valinor in an insane attempt to conquer the Undying Lands. But a great chasm opened in the sea, and Númenor on the edge of the rift toppled down into the abyss and was swallowed up. After the cataclysm, there was no dwelling place of the gods on earth, for Valinor was taken into the realm of the hidden things, and if men sailed west over the sea, they came no nearer to the land of the gods, for the world was made round. And those that sailed furthest set but a girdle about the earth, returned weary to the last place of their beginning, and they said, all roads are now bent. Only to the lingering elves of Middle-earth was it granted to sail away on the straight road and come into the true west. There's the island of Numenor. The second of these short works is called Of the Rings of Power, and this is recounted in the manner of the Silmarillion, the great events of the later ages, and by its conclusion, the War of the Ring is placed into the context of the whole history of the Eldar, the High Elves, in Middle-earth. The book thus concludes with a greater finality than does The Lord of the Rings, although both end at the same point with the departure of the White Ship from the Grey Havens, for this is indeed the end of the story. In the twilight of autumn it sailed out of Mithlond, until the seas of the bent world fell away beneath it, and the winds of the round sky troubled it no more, and borne upon the high airs above the mists of the world it passed into the ancient west, and an end was come for the Eldar of story and of song. Christopher Tolkien, 1977. And you get The Hills of the Morning. And that's this little book. I'm assuming this is one of the Numenor rugs or whatever. It's a nice little type book. But yeah, that book came with this as well. And then grab the Hobbits. If I can put it back. It is a bit tricksy, you see. Tricksy little hobbitses. Alright. The Hobbits! The Hobbits, the Hobbits, the Hobbits, the Hobbits, to Isengard, to Isengard, the Hobbits, the Hobbits, the Hobbits, the Hobbits. Oh gosh, this one's a little bit thicker. And it's bonus book. Yeah, poor Turambar. Pretty tragic ending for him and his sister and their child. And I never really understood the particulars because, and maybe this is just me being my stupid self. But let's say, you didn't know your sister and she shows up and she's lost. She doesn't remember you. She doesn't have any memories of anything. And you kind of fall in love with this woman because you just met this woman. You had no idea, no contemplation that she's your sibling in any shape or form. You fall in love with her and you end up having a child together. So she's pregnant. And that's where everything goes south. Why would she cast herself into the chasm? I mean, obviously she assumes Turin's dead. But why not just be like, well, this is my legacy, I guess. It's just like, I fell in love with a guy, didn't know he's my brother. I mean, has that ever happened in the history of humanity where siblings are separated at birth and then 20, 30 years passes and then they end up meeting in a bar somewhere and then, they fall in love, they get married and they have kids and then they find out, oh, we were actually siblings. I guess I'm just going to throw myself off of a skyscraper because I can't just be like, well, we didn't know. We're a little past that point. I don't know. It just seems weird to my mind. But then again, I don't live based off of shame culture and that kind of honorific system. But yeah, here's the image of that. Obviously that and the binder. Because I mean, I feel like if you discover that you married your sister way after the point, and this is where like the Catholicism aspect would come into play. It's just like, okay, you're not supposed to divorce your spouse, right? Divorce is not the ideal situation, and it's frowned upon from the, the God perspective, unless there's like abuse or something like that. And there's usually stuff that they have particular like outs for certain things, right? But if you're like a what is it? I guess polyamorous, not a polygamist. If you're like a polygamist family where you're a guy and three wives or something because you moved here from, the Middle East or something, and you have your family, and you all become Catholic or Christian or whatever, do you divorce all of your wives except one? Because you're not supposed to divorce your wife, and you did it before you were a Christian. Are you not supposed to take care of them and the children that came from them? It becomes a very wonky thing, and there's not really a good plan to go in there. There's not really a plan at all. It's just kind of, I guess we'll just figure it out. Snazzy, snazzy little book. Also, shiny, shiny object. Look, more maps. We have this, which I'm not particularly sure what it is. I can't really read it. It's an Elvish. Oh, it's Thorin's letter to Bilbo. Nice. So Thorin's letter to Bilbo. I don't know. It feels like to me if you were to come across and have the like turn bar thing, you're not gonna just be like, I'm cutting you out of my life. Like you're already past that point. I would understand if they did it intentionally, like they knew. I don't understand why you would like punish somebody for like an incestuous relationship that they didn't have any idea about. Like they're just like, we didn't know. We've been together with each other for 40 years. We have 12 kids and 100,000 grandkids. We had no idea we were siblings until way late in life, and now you want us to just nick it off, and it's like, I don't get it, but at that point, everything's jacked to bits anyway. Gosh, it looks so freaking pretty in that binder. And this is the other thing that came with it. I assume is the map of the Lonely Mountain. Yep, it's the map of the Lonely Mountain, y'all. Pretty snazzy. Oh, and on the back. Yeah, I'm sure she was driven mad by Glaurung and put into shock by her evil deeds, but I don't know. I feel like there could have been something done about it. Like people that followed her or Turin could have been like, "Hey, she's trying to throw someone to stop it." Like I don't know, freaking. Maybe I'm crazy. Ooh, this is gold, not silver this time. Let's see what these back images are. Ooh, yeah, this is one of my favorite images of the Hobbit books back in the olden days. They had the wraparound book with this. And if you see this side, it says, as with all the art included inside the book, the final dust jacket of The Hobbit was produced by its author, J.R.R. Tolkien, and was printed in 3 flat colors, green, blue, and black. Yeah. Red has, however, since been added to the dragon Smaug and to the sun in the accordance with the author's wishes. In a letter to Alan and Unwin, Tolkien explained that the presence of the sun and moon in the sky together refers to the magic attaching to the door in the Lonely Mountain, according to the hidden message in Thror's map. The Lonely Mountain appears at the center of the design, with a long road leading up to it through deep woods and past, at right, the town of Esgaroth on the Long Lake. The border of Anglo-Saxon runes on the final dust jacket reads, "The Hobbit, or There and Back Again, being the record of a year's journey made by Bilbo Baggins of Hobbiton, compiled from his memoirs by J.R.R. Tolkien and published by George Allen and Unwin Ltd." I think it's limited, but J.R.R. Tolkien's paintings is now reproduced without type to allow readers to fully appreciate the journey taken by Bilbo and the company of dwarves from Mirkwood across the Long Lake and up to the Lonely Mountain. Then we have another map of sorts. I hate how these things are folded sometimes. Wilderland. Alright, so this is from Imladris, Rivendell, all the way to the Lonely Mountain, which you can see in the top corner with the dragon. Pretty nifty. I'm going to say it's safe to assume you know what's in the artwork, like that of Hobbiton. The hill, Hobbiton across the water. Chapter 7, Queer Lodgings. Gay lodgings? What? Oh, that's kind of cool. There's so many cool bits and pieces of here. There's a lot of illustrations in this one. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit, not a nasty, dirty, wet hole, filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole, with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. It had a perfectly round door like a porthole, painted green with a shiny yellow brass knob in the exact middle. The door opened on into a tube-shaped hall like a tunnel, a very comfortable tunnel without smoke, with paneled walls and floors tiled and carpeted, provided with polished chairs and lots of pegs for hats and coats. The hobbit was very fond of visitors. The tunnel wound on, going fairly but not quite straight into the side of the hill. The hill, as all the people for many miles round called it, and many little round doors opened out of it, first on one side and then on another. No going upstairs for the hobbit. Bedrooms, bathrooms, cellars, pantries, lots of these, wardrobes, he had whole rooms devoted to clothes, kitchens, dining rooms, all were on the same floor, and indeed on the same passage. The best rooms were all on the left-hand side going in, for these were the only ones to have windows, deep-set, round windows looking over his garden, and meadows beyond sloping down to the river. The hobbit was a very well-to-do hobbit, and his name was Baggins. The Bagginses had lived in the neighborhood, if I can turn the page, of the hill for time out of mind, and people considered them very respectable, not only because most of them were rich, but also because they had never had any adventures or did anything unexpected. You could tell what a Baggins would say on any question without the bother of asking him. This is a story of how a Baggins had an adventure and found himself doing and saying things altogether unexpected. He may have lost the neighbor's respect, but he gained, well, you will see whether he gained anything in the end. I'll just presume you're familiar with this one. But not this one, because I don't think you got this part. Mathums, a treasury of writings including a brief history of and other works related to The Hobbit. Got a nice little grip to it. Okay, this one's a bit longer, so I'm not going to read this one. At least not all the way. The table of contents is a history of The Hobbit by Christina Scull and Wayne G. Hammond. Thorin's Letter to Bilbo by John D. Ratliff. Publication Christina Scull and Wayne G. Hammond. Excuse me. Later editions Christina Scull and Wayne G. Hammond. The Horde by J.R.R. Tolkien. Note Christina Scull and Wayne G. Hammond. Lecture on Dragons, Christina Scull and Wayne G. Hammond. And then Dragons by J.R.R. Tolkien. And it's just like a little cool little booklet of a bunch of stuff with writings and everything in them. Having all of the different illustrations and whatnot. All right, we got a poem here, so we're going to read it. The Horde by J.R.R. Tolkien. When the moon was new and the sun young, of silver and gold the gods sung. In the green grass they silver spilled, and the white waters they with gold filled. Ere the pit was dug or hell yawned, ere dwarf was bred or dragon spawned, there were elves of old in strong spells, under green hills and hollow dells. They sang as they wrought many fair things, and the bright crowns of the elf kings. But their doom fell, and their song waned, by iron hewn and by steel chained. Greed that sang not, nor with mouth smiled, in dark holes their wealth piled. Graven silver and carven gold, over Elvenhome the shadow rolled. There was an old dwarf in a dark cave, to silver and gold his fingers clave. With hammers and tongs and anvil stone, he worked his hands to the hard bone. And coins he made, and strings of rings, and I thought to buy the power of kings. But his eyes grew dim, his ears dull, and the skin yellow on his old skull. Through his bony claw with a pale sheen, the stony jewels slipped unseen. No feet he heard, though the earth quaked, when the young dragon his thirst slaked. And the stream smoked at his dark door, the flames hissed on the dark floor, or the dank floor. Jeez, my eyesight just gave out on me. And he died alone in the red fire, his bones were ashes in the hot mire. There was an old dragon under grey stone, his red eyes blinked as he lay alone. His joy was dead, his youth spent, he was knobbed and wrinkled and his limbs bent, in the long years to his gold chained, in his heart furnace the fire waned. To his belly's slime gems stuck and thick, silver and gold he would snuff and lick. He knew the place of the least ring beneath the shadow of his black wing. Of thieves he thought on his hard bed, and dreamed that on their flesh he fed. Their bones crushed and their blood drank, his ears drooped and his breath sank. Male rings rang, he heard them not. A voice echoed in his deep grot. A young warrior with a bright sword called him forth to defend his horde. His teeth were knives, and of his horn his hide, but iron tore him, and his flame died. There was an old king on a high throne, his white beard lay on knees of bone, his mouth savored neither meat nor drink, nor his ears song, he could only think of his huge chest with carven lid, where pale gems and gold lay hid, and secret treasury in the dark ground, its strong doors were iron bound. The sword of his thanes were dull with rust, his glory fallen, his rule unjust, his halls hollow, his bowers cold. But king he was of elvish gold. He heard not the horns in the mountain pass, he smelt not the blood of the trodden grass, But his halls were burned, his kingdom lost, in cold pit his bones were tossed. There's an old hoard in the dark rock, forgotten behind doors none can unlock. That grim gate no man can pass, on the mound grows the green grass. There sheep feed and the larks soar, and the wind blows from the seashore. The old hoard of the night shall keep, while earth waits, and the elves sleep. That's freaking nifty. I think there's one more, maybe? Okay, that's a little longer than I was anticipating, so no. I was going to go over the dragons one, because I like dragons. Oh, here's a dragon. Coiled dragon, specifically. Which is a nifty little book. Yeah, it's a little hefty. It's a hefty little boy. Not hefty and like heavy, but just thick with knowledge, you might say. Alrighty. And now for the final act. In his power he was jacked. The Lord of the Rings. It also came with this illustrated deluxe edition snippet. Blah, 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 blah. Just basically tells everything that's in it as a deluxe edition. This one didn't come with an extra bonus book, sadly. But it did come with freaking snazzy looking artwork. Which, I mean, mirrors this, technically speaking. And that's really just nice and smooth, book smelly. I think this is supposed to be gold as well. I can't really tell in the lighting, but Silmarillion silver, these ones are not. Oh, snap. The King's Letter. This is one of 3 facsimiles of the King's Letter, which was sent by Aragorn the Elessar to Sam, inviting him and his family to meet the king as he traveled north. The letter is in Tengwar in 2 columns, which translated reads. Well, I'll show you the letter first. Isn't that freaking sick looking? It's a kind of, it's like a silverish, but it's also like a color. I can't really explain it. But it translated reads, Aragorn Strider, the Elfstone, King of Gondor and Arnor, and Lord of the Westlands, will approach the bridge of the Branduin on the 8th day of spring, or in the Shire reckoning the 2nd day of April, and he desires to greet there all his friends. In especial, he desires to see Master Samwise, Mayor of the Shire, and Rose, his wife, and Eleanor, Rose, Goldilocks, and Daisy, his daughters, and Frodo, Merry, Pippin, and Hamfast, his sons. To Samwise and Rose the king's greeting from Minas Tirith, the 31st day of the stirring, being the 23rd of February in their reckoning. And then AE. Which I assume is down at the bottom corner. The letter appears in the epilogue to The Lord of the Rings, a scene of quiet contentment at Bag End. Sam has just completed the reading of the Red Book to his older children, an event which takes place only on great days such as today, the birthday of his eldest daughter, Eleanorel. With the rest of the family abed, Eleanor begins to question her father about certain details left unanswered in the great tale. The final version of the epilogue was written at a very late stage, but it is evident that it was intended by Tolkien to be a part of the story. He was, however, ultimately persuaded by others to omit it from the published text, a decision that, according to his son Christopher, he seems to have both accepted and regretted. To learn more about the epilogue and to read it in full, readers are directed to Christopher Tolkien's discussion of it in chapter 11 of Sauron Defeated, Volume 9 of the History of Middle-earth. So, once again, King's Letter, pretty snazzy looking. What do we got here?
It's precious. It's scratching its pockets, it says.
This is probably the map everybody and their grandmother has seen. Yes. The map of Middle-earth. The great map of Middle-earth. All the way to Rune. Up to the Road with. And down to the near Harad. It's such good contrasting. What else does it have? Ooh. Ooh. We got ourselves another map, but that's not the ooh part. There's another part in there. Oh, nice. Wow. Gondor, Rohan, and Mordor. It shows basically the mountainous ranges and the levels and everything. That's pretty snazzy. Yeah, that's pretty freaking snazzy. No, what we have is this little snippet. It says the leaves from the Book of Marzabul. I'm not sure off the top of my head what that means, but I'm going to be very careful because I don't want to destroy anything. It says the Tolkien Estate Limited, 1976 to 2021. Ooh. Woo! Old paper smell. I think it's not an old paper, though. So this is this. I think that's upright. Or is this upright? This is upright. Apparently this is from a book of sorts. And it's got a back side as well. Not too much to the back side. I'm wondering if these are specifically things that were found later on. Pretty freaking snazzy. Pretty freaking snazzy. I'm gonna have to look up what it actually is, because I'll be very careful with it. Alright. The Book of Marzabul. Let's see what that puppy is. The Book of Marzabul is a dwarven chronicle documenting the failed attempt by Balin and his colony to reclaim Moria during the Third Age. It was written in the Chamber of Marzabul, also known as the Chamber of Records, and contains entries in Kirith of Moria and Dale, Tengwar, and Angrathas Erebor, reflecting the diverse authors and the urgency of the final days. History. The book was begun in TA 2989 after Balin's return to Moria. It recorded their initial victory over orcs, their settlements in the 21st Hall, and the recovery of treasures like Durin's axe and mithril armor. I feel like if you had enough mithril armor, you wouldn't lose anybody, but okay. Final entries. The last pages, written by Ori, describe the final days of the colony. After Balin's death, the dwarves were besieged by orcs from the east and the Watcher in the water from the west. The final entry reads, "We cannot get out. The end comes soon. Drums, drums in the deep. They are coming." Discovery. Found 24 years later by the Fellowship of the Ring in the Chamber of Marzabul, the book was burned, slashed, and stained with blood. Gandalf read it aloud, revealing the fate of Balin's colony. Fate. Gandalf gave the book to Gimli to return to King Dain in Erebor. Its ultimate fate is unknown, but it is believed Gimli may have carried it to the Lonely Mountain, possibly returning it to Thorin III. Tolkien's design. J.R.R. Tolkien created 3 facsimile pages of the book, intentionally aged with burnt edges, pierced binding holes, and blood-like stains to mimic medieval manuscripts. These were the first published in 2005 50th anniversary deluxe edition of the Fellowship of the Ring, and later in 2021 one-volume special edition, which is this one. Original drawings are held in the Bodleian libraries. That's freaking cool. So, only 2 ways to get this, apparently, and I got one of them, yeah. Goodness gracious. Let's see if they have anything at the beginning. Hopefully you saw the King's Letter. If not, there it is again. All right. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and the darkness bind them, to the land of Mordor where the shadow lie. The Ringverse. List of illustrations. There's going to be a lot of freaking illustrations. And they have everything split up into their books. 6 books. There's actually not that many of these illustrations, surprisingly. Concerning hobbits. These pages are like stuck together. Unexpected party. 3 is a company. Shortcut to mushrooms. The old forest. The plan of Bree. Gosh, these are so freaking nice. Yeah, these pages are like stuck together. They need like a breathery or something. And the sweet, sweet dependencies. Oh gosh, smoke just came off of it. Or dust. You can hear it. That's it not having been used. Like that puff of just smoke. It's like, oh goodness. I think I freed it up a little bit so it can do its thing. The Arm of Sauron. Scouring of the Shire. Yeah, I know, right? Probably should have recorded it. Appendices A. Annals of the Kings and Rulers, the Númenórean Kings. I remember looking through my other copies of this for the whole War of the Rohirrim stuff. Actually, there's a lady who does Tolkien ASMR where she like reads chapters from The Hobbit and I think from Fellowship of the Ring. She doesn't have a whole lot of them out, but they do exist. Where she like whispers as she reads and she like traces the books and stuff like that. So that does exist. I mean, all you have to do is like Lord of the Rings ASMR. It's pretty hard to miss. Which appendices was Helm Hammerhand in? Stewards, Aragorn and Arwen. Ah, here we are, the House of Eorl. The Kingdom Artist said that Helm Hammerhand, he was a grim man of great strength, and there was a time a man named Freka, who claimed descent from King Freowine, though he had, men said, much Dunlandish blood, and he was dark-haired. He grew rich and powerful, having wide lands on either side of the Adorn. Near its source he made himself a stronghold and paid little heed to the king. Helm mistrusted him, but called him to his councils, and he came when it pleased him. To one of these councils Freka rode with many men, and he asked the hand of Helm's daughter for his son Wolf. That's it. That's her mention. But Helm said, "You have grown big since you were last here, but it is mostly fat, I guess." And men laughed at that, for Freka was wide in the belt. Then Freka fell in rage and reviled the king, and said this at the last: "Old kings that refuse a proffered staff may fall on their knees." Helm answered, "Come, the marriage of your son is a trifle. Let Helm and Freka deal with it later. Meanwhile the king and his council have matters of a moment to consider." When the council was over, Helm stood up and laid his great hand on Freka's shoulder, saying, "The king does not permit brawls in his house, but men are freer outside." And he forced Freka to walk before him out from Edoras into the field. To Freka's men that came up he said, "Be off. We need no hearers. We are going to speak of a private matter alone. Go and talk to my men." And they looked and saw that the king's men and his friends far outnumbered them, and they drew back. "Now, Dunlading," said the king, "you have only Helm to deal with, alone and unarmed. But you have said much already, and it is my turn to speak. Freka, your folly has grown with your belly. You talk of a staff. If Helm dislikes a crooked staff that is thrust on him, he breaks it. So." With that he smote Freka with such a blow that he fell back stunned and died soon after. Helm then proclaimed Freka's son and near kin the king's enemies, and they fled, for at once Helm sent many men riding to the west marches. And never again was she mentioned. Yep. What could have possibly gone wrong with making an entire thing about somebody who doesn't even have their name mentioned? They're barely even in the story, and they're only in the story particularly as a potential marriage partner. That's it. It's the dumbest concept I could possibly think of. And that is that, good sirs. That is that. Oh, I need to put this with it because this is the little snazzy wazzy. I hope it fits inside. I don't think it will, but I hope it does. Oh, it does. Snazzy. 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 I would love to hear about Eomer and Aragorn's subjugation of the Easterlings and of the Haradrim and of Mordor and purging the Middle Earth of all these things. Like, that would be so freaking cool. Honestly, an RTS game based on Aragorn's subsequent wars with Rohan, with Eomer, and going out and basically just reconquering the world and reestablishing Arnor would be such a fun game, provided you could stick to as much of the actual source material as possible, which there isn't great amounts, but it implies certain things, and you could add stuff to it to which it would still make sense but not be the legitimate only possibility. Like, it would have to be very, very carefully handled, but you could make a fun game like that, in like the style of Battle for Middle Earth almost, or even Age of Empires too, I suppose. But I don't know. I think that would be freaking cool. I just don't trust anybody to do it, except for maybe me, and a couple other people that are actual fans and would not toss out their principles at the first sign of discomfort or some nonsense. But I mean, there's lots we could cover for games. I'm not sure what would be the greatest. Unfortunately, it looks like Rockhound was not able to join. Sad face. He was having issues on YouTube on his phone, so I don't know what was going on with that. But more or less, that's the unboxing. I could probably cut that out and make a video.